Hello, this is Dr. Clarence R. Pearson Sr., and welcome to My View, a podcast where I offer my professional perspective on today's most pressing geopolitical and socioeconomic issues. Recently, my attention has been drawn to developments concerning Africa and the discussion about the recent UN's slavery resolution. Here is my view on the matter, from memory to repair: why the UN's slavery resolution matters. On March 25th, 2026, the United Nations General Assembly crossed a moral threshold that the international system had delayed for far too long. By adopting Resolution A80L48, the Assembly declared the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved Africans and racialized chattel enslavement of Africans the gravest crime against humanity. The resolution passed with 123 votes in favor, 3 against, and 52 abstentions. It is non binding, but its significance lies in something deeper than enforceability. It moves the global conversation from remembrance to repair. That shift matters because slavery has long been acknowledged as a horror while being insulated from the full legal and political vocabulary of redress. The new resolution explicitly links the crime not only to historical suffering, but to its enduring consequences, including systemic racism, inequality, and underdevelopment. Ghana, which introduced the text on behalf of the African Group and CARICOM, presented the resolution as a safeguard against historical amnesia and as a platform for reparatory justice rather than mere symbolic regret. The vote also exposed a deep geopolitical divide. The United States, Israel, and Argentina voted against the resolution. Washington argued that the text improperly created a hierarchy of crimes against humanity and objected to applying present day legal standards retroactively to conduct that was not codified in the same way under international law at the time. That position is legally cautious, but politically revealing. It shows that many powerful states remain willing to acknowledge slavery's evil in moral terms while resisting any language that could strengthen claims for material repair. The abstentions were equally telling. The United Kingdom and the European Union did not deny the horror of slavery. In their explanations of vote, they emphasized that slavery and the slave trade are rightly prohibited today and that their enduring effects must be addressed. But they rejected the resolution's legal framing, especially its use of superlative language and its implications for contemporary liability. The British government argued that legal principles cannot be circumvented by invoking continuing harms, while the EU similarly objected to the resolution's legal construction, even as it affirmed responsibility to confront slavery's legacy. That is a position of moral acknowledgement without legal surrender. Yet, even without Western consensus, the resolution carries substantial political weight. Reuters and other reporting on the vote make clear that support came overwhelmingly from Africa, the Caribbean, and the wider global south, but it also included major powers such as China, India, and Russia. That matters because the reparations question is no longer a niche advocacy project. It is increasingly becoming part of a broader struggle over who gets to define justice in the international order. The significance of the vote lies partly in its isolation of the traditional powers that once set the terms of this debate unchallenged. What comes next will likely be shaped by two complementary but distinct frameworks: CARICOM's 10-point plan for reparatory justice and the African Union's decade-long reparations agenda. CARICOM's plan is the older and more litigation-ready of the two. It calls for a full formal apology, repatriation programs, indigenous peoples development, cultural institutions, public health initiatives, illiteracy eradication, African knowledge programs, psychological rehabilitation, technology transfer, and debt cancellation. It is concrete, specific, and structured to translate moral recognition into tangible obligations. The African Union's framework, by contrast, is broader and more developmental in orientation. The AU designated 2025 as its year of reparations under the theme Justice for Africans and People of African Descent Through Reparations, and African institutions have since endorsed a formal AU decade on reparations from 2026 to 2036. The emphasis is not only on apology or compensation, but on structural transformation, restitution of looted heritage, institutionalized continental coordination, and using reparations as part of a larger agenda for sovereignty, dignity, and economic rebalancing. This difference between CARICOM and the AU is important. CARICOM's model asks, in effect, what specific repairs are owed for a specific historic crime. The AU's model asks how reparations can help correct the long economic and political afterlife of slavery, colonialism, and racial domination. One approach is more juridical, the other is more systemic, but they are not in conflict. Together, they form a two-track movement, one aimed at direct redress and one aimed at long-term restructuring. The next major frontier is legal. Because the General Assembly resolution is non-binding, it does not itself compel states to pay reparations or establish a mandatory fund, but it may strengthen the case for an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice. Reporting on the current debate indicates that Caribbean and African advocates are considering exactly that path, hoping to use the resolution's language, including its invocation of peremptory norms, to build a stronger legal basis for state responsibility. An ICJ advisory opinion would not automatically produce compensation, but it could dramatically alter the diplomatic terrain by clarifying whether reparations claims rest on more than moral force alone. That is why this vote matters beyond its immediate legal limits. It marks a transition in international discourse from passive memory to active obligation. For centuries, the wealth extracted through slavery helped finance empires, build institutions, and distort global development. For nearly as long, descendants of the enslaved were asked to carry the damage while the world treated acknowledgement as enough. The General Assembly has now said, in effect, that acknowledgement is not enough. The real test begins now. If the resolution remains only a statement, it will still matter as a moral milestone. But if the African Union, CARICOM, and their allies turn it into a platform for advisory opinions, debt discussions, artifact restitution, development compacts, and formal negotiations, then March 25th, 2026 may be remembered not simply as a day of recognition, but as the day the international system began, however imperfectly, to reckon with a centuries-old debt. My View is a continuing series where I share informed commentary on a wide range of geopolitical and socioeconomic topics. If you found today's discussion helpful, please follow, subscribe, like, and share. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I invite you to explore other My View episodes available online. Until we meet again, goodbye.